Okay. Hello, everybody. This is a short recording about the Purdue Writing Lab. It's called the Online Writing Lab, OWL. And you can find it pretty easily just by searching for OWL Purdue. But this is really your biggest help. It's the thing that's really what you need when you're working on your paper. You should have this open. It shows you everything. It starts with the writing process. What do you need to get started? For example, pre-writing questions, right? It explains, gives you some questions to help you think. You can look at different types of writing, definition, comparison, contrast. This site just helps you get started with everything. If you have writer's block, meaning you can't write, it gives you some cures. If you get stuck, of course, you can always write to me if you get stuck or you can't get going on it. That often happens because it's hard to write a paper. It's painful, right? Here's some great tips on outlining. So not just getting started, but like looking at different kinds of outlines here, right? It gives different types of outlines, full sentence outlines, keyword outlines, alphanumeric outlines, right? Different kinds of outlines that you can use to get started and to get your writing really organized, right? So it talks a lot about outlining. As for proofreading, it gives you some good examples for revising, for rewriting, gives you some good ways of kind of using the using questions and looking for specific things that you need to do. Most of this site also talks about things like paragraphs, right? What's a paragraph? An essay. We'll be looking at argumentative essays mostly. That's what we do in literature. So this gives you some explanation about what's essential for that. Talks about the 5-paragraph essay, but we'll start to write more than that. But this is just kind of a backup to help you look at what you need to do when you're writing the essay. The other important part of this is the research and citation. Like, how do you do quotes? Up above, it talks about how to use quotation marks, right? So this explains, like, using quotes. Where do you put the comma? Where do you put the quotation? This gives you different ways to use quotations, different ways to include the quotation. But you also need to know how to put that inside paper that you're writing. So what we'll use in this class is the MLA style. There's different styles, Chicago, APA, but we'll use MLA. That stands for Modern Language Association, Modern Literature Association, and it gives you some basics about what you need. So let's jump in and take a look. In-text formatting quotations. You can see here it's giving this basic form of how you use quotes, right? Usually students will put a whole sentence in, but you can put just part of a sentence in, and that's really effective, right? To put the name, to put the page number. It gives you really good examples of how to do that. Down below, it gives you an example of the work cited. How does the works cited work? What does it look like? This is an example. This goes at the end of your paper. No matter what paper you're writing, you have to put this in. It's really important to have that works cited because that shows it's an academic paper. It also shows what did you read. So going back to the sitemap here, we can see that this really covers many types of situations. It talks about plagiarism, talks about writing workshops, very specific things down here. Writing in literature has a whole section on literature, different kinds of approaches like eco-criticism. This is a little bit complicated, and we'll get into this next year as well, or next semester as we look at some of the other ways to approach things. But this just gives you a nice set of ideas if you want to write like psychoanalytic criticism, or you want to do feminist criticism. This gives you some great ideas about how to write according to looking at feminist theory, to look at, like, how are the women presented, how are the women looked at in any work of fiction. This gives some more idea about how to write about literature, writing about fiction. This gives you some ideas about how to read closely, to put notes in the text, right? And this gives you some dangers like the right answer, no, there's no right answer, and the plot syndrome, don't tell the plot again, right? Everything that's included in this literature section here will be super helpful to you when you're writing your paper. Let's go back up to the top again because there's so much on this site. It's just huge. But it gives you some things about grammar. And again, this isn't a grammar textbook, but it gives you like ways to use pronouns better, how to write complicated sentences. It talks about even these small things like using the font correctly, analyzing different kinds of documents, right? Talks about punctuation, how to use that, how to use commas, basic rules. So if you get stuck with anything, this Purdue OWL really has the answer. And what I want you to do is to be sure when you're writing your paper that you have this open, so you can make your papers more full, more complete, and follow the correct format so it looks really good. After you use it a few times on a few papers, it'll get really easy. But basically, the answer to every question you have about writing, even if you don't know what the question is, you can find here. And of course, if you can't find it here, you just send me an email and I'll direct you towards it. Or if there's something that you don't know how to ask the question, you can ask me and I'll help you find it. Okay? So use this Purdue OWL. It's a fantastic free source. It's a resource that every student should use. Most universities in America have this kind of online writing lab, and they have an in-person writing lab too. So we can use this freely and know that the advice that's here will be really, really helpful to us. So check it out, use it, rewrite your papers, use this rewriting your papers, use this writing your papers all the time. Okay?